Andrew Friedman has delivered again. The Dodgers have a new outfielder, and his name is Teoscar Hernandez. We talk about what the deal is, what it brings to the Dodgers, what it means for the Dodgers roster, and what it means for the 40-man roster. There's a lot to get into, so let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off that order. That's JASE medical.com. This is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And if you want to become one of our favorite listeners, that's called an everydayer. All you have to do is listen or watch every day or as close to it as possible. And that's all you have to do. If you're not an everydayer, please think about becoming one. And the easiest way to do so is by subscribing. Once again, wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. If this is your first time listening, watching, welcome. I am Vince Samperio, joined by my co-host, Jeff Snider. And we are both lifelong Dodger fans that have covered the team in a variety of ways over the last few years, this podcast being one of those ways. And we're just guys that love to talk about Dodgers, love to talk about baseball. And we're here to bring you some what we believe are smart and rational thoughts about the Dodgers. And that's what we're here to do today. And we have some news to talk about. Jeff, the Dodgers are reportedly in agreement on a deal with Teoscar Hernandez, 1 year, $23.5 million with some deferrals. Jeff Passan broke the news, a bunch of confirmations after the fact. After all the talk of he wanted multi-year deals, and after all the talk of, the Dodgers might not be the front runners anymore, and then they were the front runners, and then everything else. It seems like kind of the way this offseason has gone. At the end of the day, the Dodgers get the guy that they wanted and that most of us wanted.
Yeah, according to Passan, Teoscar had some multi-year contracts offers, and he chose to go with the Dodgers because presumably he liked his chances of winning a little bit more with the team that is going all in on winning and was already a good team to start with. And earlier in the day, Andrew Friedman was on MLB Network and said that what he was working on was an outfielder who mashes lefties and can hold his own against righties. And that, basically that was either Teoscar or Rosarena. When you use the word mash, like Tommy Pham, a lot of these other guys we've talked about as possibilities, none of them are lefty mashers. It really came down to those two guys. So after that report, that wasn't even a report. It was Jim Bowden who tweeted it out, but it was literally straight from the horse's mouth of Andrew Friedman. So we knew there was something big happening. And I feel pretty good about Teoscar.
Yeah, like we just talked about him last week and, kind of what he brought to the team. But yeah, we don't know. So far all we've heard about one of those multi-year deals was the Boston Red Sox, the little engine that could Boston Red Sox, who could only muster up an offer of 2 years and $28 million, according to Chris Cotillo. So yeah, if he had multi-year offers like that and the Dodgers came in with $23.5 million for 1 year, I could understand why he took this deal. There are deferrals not significant enough to make a huge difference, but it was, I think they said $8.5 million over a year span starting in 2030 something. So it doesn't mean too much for the Dodgers, especially for the CBT. They're going to be over that 297 now, I believe. But yeah, this is the guy that we've talked about more than a few times, and basically the guy that we kind of wanted that other than Randy, who would have to come by trade and would have needed the Rays to be a willing partner, where here you just have to sign the guy. You don't have to make a deal for him. And yeah, I guess before we talk about exactly what he brings to the team, 1 year deals are all good, right? For the most part.
Yeah, I don't think there's any such thing as a bad 1 year deal. We saw it with Jason Hayward last year. We've seen it even on the other side. We saw it with Noah Syndergaard last year too. It was 1 year, so they're not locked into anything. And if everything goes great, well, then Teoscar's a free agent again next year, and the Dodgers can sign him to a longer term deal. If you assume if Teoscar wins a World Series with the Dodgers this year, he'll be at least open to the idea of coming back on a longer term deal. And if the Dodgers win a World Series with him, that probably means that he bounced back from his down year in 2023. So it's really the potential downside is that Teoscar has a monster season and then chooses to leave in free agency. But whenever the potential downside includes the guy you just signed being awesome, that's a downside you're willing to risk.
Yeah, exactly. And so we'll look at what he brings to the team, and obviously he brings power. He's hit at least 25 homers in the last 3 seasons. If you go back all the way to 2019, he's hit at least 25 homers in all those seasons, obviously minus 2020 when he had 16 in 50 games played. So he brings the power. He does strike out a lot. We talked about it a little bit, how in the past, how he's not a prototypical, Dodger guy, and in the sense of high on base or not big strikeout, but also a guy that walks. He's not that type of guy. He had a little bit of a down year last year in Seattle, but all his years in Toronto were really, really good. And there's nothing that kind of shows that he got that much worse. His strikeout rate was a little bit higher last year, but he was still up there in hard hit percentage and barrel percentage. So for what the Dodgers need, kind of how we've mentioned before, he's going to bat 6th or 7th in this lineup against righties. He might bat, 4th, 5th, 6th in this lineup against lefties. He's not going to be counted on to do he's not counted on to be that guy, and that might help out.
Yeah, it was funny. I saw a couple people put out projected lineups after this news broke, and I saw Rosarena. I saw Teoscar anywhere from 4th to 8th in this lineup. And yeah, you could see, 8th is probably a little low, assuming Jason Hayward and Gavin Lux are both in the lineup. And realistically, even other than the fact that all 3 guys are left-handed, bottom 3 of Hayward, Outman, and Lux in some order makes a lot of sense. They might try to break up the lefties, so we might not see exactly that. But yeah, you could see Teoscar batting anywhere in the lineup except for 1 through 3, and that means anywhere except the most pressure, and so it's and he's even shown signs in 2021, his one all-star year, his strikeout rate was only 24.9%, which is higher than league average, but not by a lot, and significantly lower than 31.1% it was last year. But maybe the Dodgers might have some insights, looking at tape from 2021, say, okay, well, what were you doing differently then? Because he still had plenty of power that year. Actually had his career high in home runs, 32 homers, 116 RBIs, all in all. And you can see his batting average was also the highest it's ever been, because when he puts the bat on the ball, he hits really well. It's just, he does strike out more than would be ideal. But, with the Dodgers lineup as it's currently constructed, it's not so bad to add in one free swinger, one swing from your heels kind of guy, because they do have a lot of patient guys, a lot of, and Teoscar, he doesn't walk either. That's the other thing, he's not 3 true outcomes. He's 2 true outcomes, home run or strikeout. But it's he hits really, really well when he hits the ball.
Yeah. And, down 6th, 7th in the lineup, 5th, 6th, 7th, wherever he's going to bat, you're not necessarily looking for an on-base guy too much. You're looking for a guy that if the guys in front of him get on base, he can, power them home. And if he comes up on his own, then he can power himself home and hit some home runs. And like you said, and like we talked about, with this Dodgers lineup the way it is, you're allowed, you can have a guy like this that's more of a free swinger that strikes out a lot, doesn't walk a lot, that, maybe doesn't fit your role. Because, they've had a lot of guys that fit what they want in the past and hasn't always worked out. And, they haven't necessarily gone this route too often, but, it could work out. And when it comes down to it, with October, which is what we all wait for, yeah, he might strike out in a big situation, possibly, but he also might hit you a home run that puts a run on the board guaranteed, and without having to string together a few hits. And that's one of those things where a lot of the times in the postseason, if you can outslug the other team, you usually win more games. There's not too many teams that can win with just base hits and everything else. So it's a good move for the Dodgers. There's still a lot more to get into about him. What does this mean for the rest of the offseason? What does this mean for the 40-man roster? That's coming up, so make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The regular season NFL is over, but that just means the playoffs are getting started, and it's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. All you have to do is place a $5 bet. Doesn't even matter if it wins or loses. There's plenty of games to bet on this coming weekend in the NFL. $150 bonus bets, win or lose. There's no downside to it. So go download the FanDuel app right now, and you can check it out, and you can try find ways to spend that $150 in your bonus bets with same game parlays. There's a new Explore tab where you can find bets that are trending or bets that other people are making. Hop in on the action with them. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub and find other popular parlays that are going on. So go check out all that on the FanDuel app. And remember, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And remember, Locked On has two 24/7 streaming channels that might be of relevance to you. Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles are running all day long, 24/7 on YouTube. Go subscribe. Check out the top news and stories from around the sports world and from around the LA sports world. All right, Jeff. Now that Teoscar is signed, it would appear that the Dodgers have 13 position players that they would be comfortable with starting the regular season. Do we or I guess we can name them real quick and then we can go through. Do we feel like that's it on the offensive side?
Yeah, it's I think it probably is, except for the fact that and we'll maybe dig into this more a little bit. They currently have 40 guys on the 40-man roster without Teoscar, and so they do have to subtract someone from the 40-man roster to make room for him. And if that is one of those 13 guys, and it's not entirely out of the question, I can think of one or two guys who might be options for that. So most likely this locks up the position player side, but there's still a chance that they could, although realistically, I think it would be. I still haven't given up on Randy Arozarena because I still could picture an outfield of Teoscar in right, Outman in center, and Arozarena in left, with Jason Hayward getting a lot of starts at one of the three positions, as kind of the utility outfielder who gets a handful of not a handful of starts, like 70% of the games that right-handed pitchers start, Hayward is in there for somebody. That doesn't seem totally out of the picture to me, since we do figure they still need to make some trades just for prospect purposes, prospect depth, all that they have. So I think they're probably done on the position player side, but I could see something crazy still happening.
Oh, Jeff, we've been spoiled too much this offseason. Yeah, it's possible. It's not impossible. And it would make sense. And if in certain realms, I think when it comes down to it, you got Freddie, Mookie, Lux, Muncy, Smith, and Barnes, and then you got Rojas, and then you got Teoscar and Hayward and Margot and Outman and Taylor. And I think realistically, the only ones that are in jeopardy on that current are Austin Barnes, who it would still be another catcher anyways, if they go a different route or if they decide on that, which I think we're too deep into it for now, but you never know. I feel like Margot could maybe get moved if they wanted another, more versatility. Now that they have Teoscar, who only plays outfield, they have Hayward, who only plays outfield, they have Outman, who only plays outfield. They're usually not as locked in terms of outfielders like that. So, Margot could get moved potentially. Chris Taylor could potentially get moved if they wanted to move off some of that salary or bring in someone else that's just as versatile. Realistically, I think Margot is probably the only one that would make sense in that realm, unless they are really looking to get under the luxury tax. But again, if they still are going to get pitching, I think they're going over that 297 regardless. So I don't think they're worried about that.
Yeah, as it is, they've got, I could see either of those guys, Chris Taylor or Manuel Margot, being traded. Obviously, the Dodgers have a soft spot for Chris Taylor. He has a soft spot for the Dodgers. He's shown them a lot of loyalty in the past, and so it does seem like they would probably show him that return loyalty, especially because he does have so much versatility and so much potential for that matter. He has been a really, really good hitter at times in the past. And so there's no reason to think he couldn't do that again. But when you've got four outfielders and all of them, you can easily cover all the positions in the outfield. You don't necessarily need an infielder / outfielder, especially when you have Miguel Rojas as the backup infielder who can play all over the infield if necessary. So they could, it would be weird to see a Dodgers team that doesn't have anybody who bounces between the infield and the outfield. I guess Mookie Betts still might a little bit in that situation, but it's not crazy to think that they might do that. But yeah, I do think if they were going to bump one of those 13 guys, it would be Margot. But yeah, realistically, it's probably not one of the guys who we're expecting on the big league roster who's gonna be leaving.
Yeah, we're gonna save this a little bit. We can kind of get into it now because it kind of bleeds into this. The 40-man roster is full. They will have to make a move. The last time though, the 40-man roster was full, Brian Hudson was the easy one to kind of say, okay, that's the guy that can get DFA'd and they wouldn't be hurt by it. They ended up making a trade out of it. But now with the 40-man roster, there's not necessarily one person that you can point to and say that's the guy. I guess the next one would be Ricky Vanasco, but they signed him to a major league deal this offseason, which means they, believe in him probably. And I don't think they would do that. But yeah, I mean, obviously something's going to have to happen. And do we think it's, trade comes first or a DFA forces a trade?
I assume they're going to try to make a trade because, yeah, like you said, I could see Gus Varland maybe. I saw somebody else throw out JP Fireeisen's name. I don't think that one's likely because he's still got 3 or 4 years of team control left and has been very, very good when he's healthy. They traded for him and he hasn't thrown a pitch for them yet. I think they're high on Fireeisen. I still think Gus Varland is the kind of guy who is more likely than not to be playing for somebody other than the Dodgers pretty soon. Simply because, he's got good stuff, but hasn't really put it together enough to say we want this guy in the big leagues on a team that plans on winning the World Series. But I don't think that that's going to come in the form of a DFA unless it's the absolute last resort. And so this could spur the Dodgers into, the other thing is, unlike with Yamamoto, there is no hurry on getting this deal finalized. And so there's no Yamamoto, they had to finish up by January 4th because that was his deadline. And if they were to get Shota Imanaga, that his deadline is January 11th. And so they would have to make a move. But if they don't make this signing of Teoscar official until spring training, that's not the end of the world. Not a big deal. They could even wait until, after spring training starts so that they can put somebody on the 60-day IL to make room for him. I doubt it'll go that long, but I assume that they are already on the phones working on trades because like we've talked about several times, trades are likely anyway, just because, when you've got Michael Busch and Miguel Vargas, who currently aren't among those 13 guys that we're talking about, and both of them should probably be playing in the major leagues in 2024. If it's not going to be with the Dodgers, it needs to be with somebody else, especially Busch with all of his value off his monster minor league season last year. So I suspect we're going to see a trade pretty soon.
Yeah, and that's what else we're going to talk about. What else can be done this offseason are the Dodgers done? We'll touch on that, which might come via trade. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape some of the crazy realities of life, but can we talk about preparing for those realities right now? Because according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade, which is a little unnerving. But if you want to get ahead of that, you'll be okay if you count on Jase Medical and use Jase Medical, because they have a Jase case, which is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, and others. And all this stuff could happen to any of us, especially right now when it's the cold and flu season. Kids going back to school after winter break, and if you have kids, you know how sick they get a lot of times, and it's not always easy to get what you need. So if you want a Jase case, you want to get prepared, go to jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. So go get prepared right now with Jase Medical. Go to jasemedical.com. And if you use the offer code locked on, you'll get $20 off your order. That's JASE medical.com. Code locked on for $20 off your order. Go check it out. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you get podcasts, and on YouTube, make sure to listen to us. We're here for you every Monday through Friday for about 30 minutes. And if you want to go beyond the podcast, you can do so with subtext. All you have to do is go to joinsubtext.com/locked on Dodgers, and you can get put into a chat with us and text us directly. And, if you would have had thoughts as soon as Teoscar, the Jeff Passan tweet was released or announced, you could have jumped in there and messaged with us, and you could have been, got our initial thoughts before we talk about it on the podcast. And there's a lot of different benefits to it throughout the year. So go check it out. All right, Jeff. So the next question now with the Dodgers is what's next? And, they still need is, I guess, semantics at this point if it's a need, but they would like another starting pitcher, and then potentially they would like another late inning reliever. Now with Teoscar on board, now with them officially kind of over the next tax, is it time to just keep going all in?
Yeah. When you've done what they've done this offseason, there's no reason to stop. I think they're still going to be smart and keep the luxury tax number as low as they can, but they're not going to let that stop them from making any deal. And so when you do have guys like Margot and Chris Taylor, both of those guys, you could save a little bit of money on luxury tax if they do move one of those guys. But I don't think that's going to be a determining factor for them at all the rest of this offseason. And they have a lot of money coming off the books after the 2024 season. And so they can always, I don't know if resetting the luxury tax, actually getting below the first threshold, is in their future anytime soon, but they could get back down, closer to that, so that, get away from the Cohen tax and safely away from that next offseason. But this is an offseason where, with who was available, it made sense to go all in. And then when you sign the top 2 free agents available, then there's absolutely no, and we said after they signed Ohtani that it made it more likely they were going to sign Yamamoto, because you do go all in. Once you get Ohtani, you keep going all in, and then they got Yamamoto too. So Teoscar makes sense, and I think it makes a lot of sense for them now that they haven't had to trade. I mean, they've traded just Johnny DeLuca and Ryan Pepio among young prospecty players this offseason, and they're almost done. And so I think you do go all in on whether it is Dylan Cease or Corbin Burns or, some pitcher who is elite or close to elite. And, it makes a lot of sense for the Dodgers to really be pushing a trade like that next, to really lock down, Shane Bieber. I'm less excited about, like we've talked about, if Class A came with them and if it was the right deal. I get that. And I don't rule out the possibility of the Dodgers being able to help Bieber regain some of his former glory. But, Corbin Burns would obviously be still my first choice, and maybe make enough of a package to get him to throw in Devin Williams too. I want to be spoiled. Okay, Vince?
Hey, I don't mind being spoiled. I'm just saying they're throwing a lot out there. But I think, it's the right time to go all in. And I think it's one of those where you're at a point with some of these guys where they're not young prospects. The 25, 26, if they weren't with the Dodgers, a lot of these guys would have already been in the majors or have be a starter somewhere, or at least gotten a full runway. Miguel Vargas got somewhat of a full runway. Michael Busch hasn't. Guys like Landon Knack, Nick Frosso, Gavin Stone, they're all, 25, 26. They're getting up there. And it's one of those where at this point, they're there for depth throughout the season, which, makes sense. But I think if you bring in another starter, now Emmett Sheehan is that depth, or Michael Grove is that depth, and you can get by with that. As we've seen, they can get by with that. It might be a little bit different in the position prospect or position side where, if somebody gets hurt, there's not necessarily somebody to call up if you trade Bush and Vargas. But I think it's one of those where you trade Bush or Vargas for sure. You trade one of, Frosso, Knack, or Stone or somebody, and you go get a top tier guy, because you do have a lot of guys waiting in the wings that are younger to be that next step up. Andy Paez is 23 now. Dalton Rushing's 22. River Ryan is also up there, 25. But then you got the next group, with the guy that drafted last year, Kendall George, and Tyron Lozano, Maddox Bruns. There's a lot of guys coming up through Josue de Paula. Like, there's a lot of guys that are going to be here in the next couple of years where you're not going to have room for everybody on the current roster and the prospects that are 25, 26, and the prospects that are going to be 23, 24, 25 in the next couple of years. So I think right now is when you make that move. You obviously keep a little depth for yourself, and it's going to suck for some of those guys that might be starting the year in AAA or moving up and down between AAA and the majors, but that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's something we don't think about a lot is the guys on the 40-man roster who aren't on the 26-man roster. That's usually a certain type of player. And the Dodgers right now don't, other than Andy Paez on the position player side, he's the only guy they have who fits that mold of young guy who's probably not ready for the big leagues yet. Everybody else they have is, it's mostly Bush and Vargas, guys who, they ought to be in the big leagues. And so, maybe we do see both of them traded, but have somebody coming back who's more along the lines of young guy, and then there's also that AAA depth where you do have once the Dodgers will have several 40-man roster spots open up once spring training starts or available because of the 60-day injured list. And so maybe you do go with like the Yanni Hernandez type, somebody who's, although I think he was on the 40-man roster last year at the start of the season, but somebody of that mold who isn't on the 40-man roster, but can come up and play in the big leagues for you in the case of an injury, fill in for a couple weeks and then get DFA'd or whatever. I'm also like, we haven't talked, we mentioned him a few times, but haven't spent a lot of time on him, but Jesus Luzardo really intrigues me too. He's only 26 years old. He's left-handed. He's throws hard. He like the Marlins might be that. I know the Marlins have a lot of arms, might be open to trade him. Maybe not as open since Alcantara went down, but also I don't know how competitive they're expecting to be.
They spend $0 this offseason. So
yeah. So, and we've heard that Luzardo might be available. He's a guy who would, I don't know, like if I was ranking Burns, Cease, and Luzardo, I'd probably, depending on the day, I'd give you a different order every day because there's arguments in favor. But I put all three of those guys over Shane Bieber. And yeah, Luzardo would really, really excite me for a lot of reasons.
And like I said, this type of roster, like depth, opens you up to, now before it was Burns and Adames. Now, Burns and Devin Williams, like you mentioned. I think the guys from Just Baseball, I saw they put out the Dodgers should go get Devin Williams, and I forgot what their offer was, but it was one of them where I would say yes in a heartbeat. So there's other guys like that, Jesus Luzardo, other guys that are maybe 2 or 3 years away that are really good that maybe teams weren't thinking about trading, but now if the Dodgers come calling and they say, hey, we got, a prospect that can play second base for you right now. We got a prospect that can, be in the back end of your rotation right now. We got a prospect, whatever the case is. I think the Dodgers can open up a lot more doors. And so far, this offseason has been pretty straightforward. We thought they'd get Ohtani. They got Ohtani. When they got Ohtani, we thought they get Yamamoto. They got Yamamoto. Glasnow was kind of mentioned from the beginning, and they got Glasnow. And, Teoscar has gotten traction the last couple weeks after those 3 deals, and now they got Teoscar. So, we're still due for a surprise move.
Yeah. And one thing that Luzardo would change that would be different from Burns or Cease is Luzardo has 3 years of team control left. And so he changes the dynamic as far as what the future looks like. And so we maybe would be more likely to see one of those pitching prospects heading out in a Luzardo trade than we might be in a Cease trade, just because if they had Luzardo, you look at what they have next year in 2025, they already have Otani and Yamamoto and Glasnow and Miller. And, if you throw in Luzardo, that's a starting five right there without touching, any of the young guys other than Bobby Miller. And so where's Nick Frasso? Where's Michael Grove? Where's Gavin Stone? Where's Landon Knack? Where's River Ryan? All those guys. Yeah. I mean, you want some depth, but I don't know that you need an entire big league rotation waiting in AAA for you. Although last year would have been nice.
Yeah. I mean, last year they didn't have it, but they got it out of necessity. But
Yeah.
Not necessarily the way they wanted it. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's maybe another big move coming. It would make sense, and kind of give these guys, Michael Busch. I'm sure they like Michael Busch, but you kind of go with some proven production at this point, and they go out and get Teoscar, and they've had, they bring back Hayward and guys like that, and Mookie's going to play more second base, so that basically takes away his position. So, yeah, I think we've said it enough times, and like I said, no discredit to him, but that's just what it is right now.
Yeah, and if Devin Williams isn't on the market, if Emmanuel Clase isn't coming, there's always the Josh Hader option too. So, yeah. I mean, Hader could be the next big move, except for the fact that they already need to open up at least one 40-man roster spot. So I do think a trade is coming next, but Hader wouldn't surprise me at some point before this offseason's done.
And kind of what we saw with the Yankee trade earlier, where they traded a guy on the 40-man, a prospect on the 40-man for a prospect that's not on the 40-man that could help out. So That's also possible to clear some of that depth. They might go get some guys that aren't on 40-mans yet. So
for sure.
We'll see. There's a lot to still get into this offseason, but Teoscar Hernandez is here. The Dodgers have a big bat in the middle to late part of the order, and Dodger fans continue getting spoiled. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to check us out in the morning, your first listen on the way to work, getting ready for work, getting ready for school, getting your kids ready at the gym, whatever you're doing. We're there for you every Monday through Friday for about 30 minutes. You can find us where you find podcasts and on YouTube. Becoming every day or by listening or watching every day. Remember, Locked On is bringing you 24/7 streaming news on Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles on YouTube. So go check those out and subscribe. Remember, you can go be on the podcast with us and talk to us directly at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vincent91. You can DM us on there. You can DM us on there as well for any questions, comments, topics. You can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Taste My Device Play Podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.